Hey everyone, welcome to this week's reading of Empire of Serpents, myself and pdmac, of course. We are picking up with chapters 9 and 10, so we will go ahead and jump into it. Chapter 9, Gwen. No! Amel's horrified scream echoed off the wrecked buildings along the street. Gwen could only imagine what she must be feeling. With the Bunus destroyed, Amel would never again feel magic coursing through her. She slumped to the ground, tears streaming down her cheeks. What did you do? Kaelin asked. I took away her power, Gwen replied. But she's still a threat. We need to keep her close. The last thing we need is her running off to report to Torian. What about the guards? Gwen looked around them and shrugged. What about them? Not these ones. Kaelin waved a hand at the surrounding city. Judging by the bell towers, I'm sure we'll be surrounded soon. Gwen was torn between staying to spread their message of need and leaving the city to wait and see who showed up in support. Lyra shifted back into her elven form and forced Amel to her feet. We should get moving away from here, Gwen decided. Let's get closer to the noble district. There should be less chaos there. They marched up the street together, Lyra pushing Amel and keeping watch over her. Gwen glanced at her rival and saw she was listless, moving along only because Lyra forced her to. For a brief moment, she felt pity for the woman, but then she reminded herself of what Amel had done in Olivelle, and pity quickly fled. Gwen turned her attention ahead where a battle was raging. Commoners were fighting against armed soldiers. The soldiers were outnumbered, but they held the advantage with better weapons and armor. We'll go around, Gwen said. We have to help them, Kaelin argued. They'll be slaughtered, and we both know we started this. Go, Lyra said. I'll stay with Amel. Gwen hesitated for a moment, then sprinted toward the battle. Kaelin ran beside her, a boyish grin plastered on his face. An overturned merchant wagon was in the street, its fresh fruits spewed everywhere. As the press of bodies grew, they stomped on the goods, slicking the cobblestones. One person slipped and fell and was promptly stabbed in the chest by a soldier. Kaelin went for him, tackling the man to the ground and using the power of his steelskin rune to crush the soldier's helm along with his head. Blood sprayed through the slit in the helmet, splattering Kaelin's face. Gwen's stomach churned at the sight, but she ignored her revulsion and grabbed a hold of a soldier, ripping his helmet off and casting him aside like a rag doll with his might rune, or with her might rune. He slammed into the wagon, his face cracking hard on one of the wheels. More soldiers joined the fray, but they were still outnumbered as Kaelin tore through their ranks. He picked up a sword from a dead soldier and became a whirlwind of death. He thrust and spun, blocked and dodged, his footwork a blur of movement. Gwen could see why Kaelin wanted to be a warrior. He was born for it. Her attention was diverted as a soldier came around the wagon. He wielded a hefty axe and swung at her, narrowly missing as she backpedaled and summoned her fire rune. A wave of heat and flames struck the soldier and sent him reeling into the cart, which caught fire. Gwen backed away as the inferno spread, and the battle momentarily lapsed as the heat forced everyone away. Kaelin shielded his eyes with his free hand and drove one of the soldiers into the flames. His screams filled the air as his armor heated, melting flesh and hair, the stench fouler than anything Gwen had smelled before. The remaining soldiers retreated, turning and fleeing into the noble district. The crowd of people shouted a cheer of victory and gave chase. Kaelin rushed along with them, and Gwen looked back at Lyra, concerned about their group getting split apart. Lyra waved her on and motioned to the east. I'll meet you outside the city. Do what must be done. Her voice penetrated Gwen's mind, jarring and unexpected. Her words were like a headache, pounding with each syllable. Gwen nodded and followed the mob, pushing through until she was beside Kaelin. He was covered in blood, gore, and sweat, and was barely recognizable. He added his voice to the cheering as one of the escaping soldiers fell and was trampled to death. This is madness, Gwen thought. So much blood and death. And yet, she knew it was a necessary evil. Torian would not give any respite, and she was determined to do the same. If her conscience was scarred, so be it. If she had nightmares for the rest of her life, but the people were free from tyranny, so be it. It would all be worth it in the end. It had to be. The crowd continued to grow as the word spread throughout the city. Farmers came with their pitchforks and scythes, metal workers wielded hammers, and others had collected weapons from fallen soldiers. The ragtag band of common people slashed and burned their way through the noble district, killing the soldiers and rounding up the nobles. Gwen convinced the people to take them as prisoners, finding some solace that not everyone would be killed. As the hours passed, more and more of the city fell under Gwen's authority. Soldiers began surrendering or fleeing the city entirely. The few who tried to fight were crushed immediately, their bodies dragged through the streets as a warning sign to those who would side with Torian. By the time Gwen's army reached the Duke's castle, the city was hers, and the Duke willingly opened his doors. Gwen didn't spare him. The people wanted his head, and she gave it to them. The mages from the Great Library have arrived, Lyra informed her. With the city won, she and Kaelin cleaned themselves and washed their clothes in the Duke's chambers, then organized the people into two groups, those who would stay in Westbend and those who would march on to Havengard. Gwen appointed leaders among the people and took account of the men and women that would be marching with her. She was disappointed to find that their numbers were only 2,000, but it was much better than when they had started. Kaelin chose a handful of people as personal guards for Gwen, and they escorted her outside the city to meet with the mages. As Gwen approached, she spotted a mage that stood out from the others. He was tall, towering over everyone else by at least a foot. His head was bald, and his arms were covered in runes. The man's most prominent feature was his hooded eyes. They captured her attention and sent a chill down her back. He wore flowing robes that were dyed a vibrant blue, and he smiled broadly when he spotted her. Quinley, he greeted, bowing low. I am Minjing, your majesty. It is an honor to join your cause. My mages and I are at your service. The honor is mine, Gwen replied, and please, call me Gwen. Minjing's smile grew bigger. A librarian mentioned you might say that. Very well, Gwen. What is your wish? My wish? Gwen's brows knitted with her confusion. Yes, what do you want us to do? Oh, right. We've secured the city and have an army of 2,000 men and women who will march with us to Havengard. You will help me with drawing the attention of Torian's mages. We will be a diversion and keep them focused on us until Connell and his forces can strike from the west. Very good. How will we serve it as a diversion? Will we attack the walls to enter the city? That would be the ideal situation, Gwen said, though I don't want it to assume it will be as easy as it sounds. Many of my mages are offensive casters. We will overcome the walls of Havengard like the waves overcome the ship. Gwen found his description poetic, but she doubted Torian and his forces would be so easily defeated. What kind of runes do they have? Our runes range widely, Minjing replied. We can call fire and lightning, run like the wind, and shatter stone like glass. Those are only a few of our talents. Are they battle tested? It's one thing to say you can kill a man, and another to do it. Trust me, I know firsthand. There are a few who have seen battle, but most of their hands have not seen blood. But do not worry, Minjing added, seeing Gwen's frown. They are capable and want to see Eisenthal change for the better. Gwen was worried he might not know his mages as well as he thought, but they were the only spellcasters she had. We will leave in the morning. You'll find lodging and food in the city, but try not to let them overindulge. A sour stomach and a headache will make the trip worse than it already is. As you command, Minjing said, bowing again. As the darkness of night covered the city in shadows, Gwen met with her army's leaders one more time to go over the many details she had no experience with. Supply lines, materials for their camp, and a weapons shortage were talked about the most. By the time the details had been finalized and Gwen was able to get some rest, she fell asleep immediately. Morning came, and Gwen opened her bleary eyes to see Kaelin standing over her. For a moment, she forgot where she was and sat up quickly. A glance around the room reminded her, and she breathed slower, trying to calm her racing heart. What news? She asked, yawning and rising out of bed. She had been so tired she'd slept with her boots on. Corliss says Connell and his forces reached Corrick. That's good, right? Yes, Kaelin replied, smiling. Would you like me to fill you in after you're fully awake? Gwen scowled at him. No. Tell me now. They've passed themselves off as one of Torian's companies and have made contact with someone named Hafkin, apparently one of Torian's commanders. Corliss seemed distracted, so I didn't get much out of her besides that, and I kept seeing images of an old woman. Kaelin shrugged. We need to get moving, Gwen said. It'll take Connell at least 2 days to reach Havengard, and we need to be there before him. I've already met with the others, and everything is in order. All we need is your word. You have it. When Gwen had heard that their forces only numbered at 2,000, she knew that wasn't enough, but also that it didn't seem like much. As the procession began the march north, Gwen realized that 2,000 people was more than she thought. The line of people stretched on, making her wonder how they would reach Havengard with any element of surprise. They marched all day, stopping just before dusk to set up camp and rest. The next day started slowly as most of the people were sluggish and exhausted. Gwen tried to be patient and had to remind herself several times that these people weren't disciplined soldiers. She wasn't a soldier either, but she also wasn't the same ignorant girl who had left Dawsbury. After another day of travel, the walls of Havantgarde were within view. The fortress jutted up from the ground, an unnatural structure amidst a wild, untamed landscape. Her motley army set up camp safely away from the place, out of range of bow, arrows, and hopefully magical attacks. Kalen forged ahead to scout the area near the castle and ensure there were no hidden surprises. Night fell, and Gwen sat in her tent, unable to sleep. There was so much uncertainty, and Kalen couldn't get a hold of Corla, which made her worry that something was wrong. She absently traced the lightning rune on her hand as she stared at the wall of the tent, her mind roaming endlessly. A sound outside broke her reverie, and she looked up as a hooded figure stepped into her tent. She thought it was Menjing, but then she saw the body of one of her guards on the ground outside. Her heart skipped a beat, and before she could summon the magic of one of her runes, the figure drew a sword. My master Grimar sends his regards.
Chapter 10, Connell. Get ready, Connell yelled, his voice rising above the tumult in front of the city. Raging fire consumed catapults and battering rams while soldiers staggered and fell, flames engulfing their bodies. A few archers launched feeble attempts to bring down a dragon, but mostly dodged the spewing flames. Connell turned an excited eye to Beto, who stood next to him, a ram's horn in his hand. Now, Beto. Beto raised the horn to his lips and blew 3 loud blasts. As Lorcan's army surged forward and Story's dwarves emerged from the forest, Beto stepped in front of Connell. General Lorcan told me to remind you that you command him, my lord. The runes tingled on Connell, and he paced like a caged animal, the urge to join the battle tormenting him, but he forced himself to take deep breaths and remember who he was. Yet one part of his brain argued, how could a soldier respect him if he wasn't in the middle of the fray? While the other part argued that he was in charge and responsible for every soldier in this army. His army. The thought startled him, for up to now they had been Lorcan's soldiers or Story's dwarves, but combined they were his army. Sure, once he gained control of the kingdom, he would have his own dedicated soldiers and Lorcan and Story would return to their own kingdoms. But for now, he was in command. A pulse of vanity flashed through him until he remembered he was responsible for the lives of thousands of soldiers, that thousands of soldiers looked to him to make wise decisions, especially when it came time for battle. The thought sobered him, and the raging torment to fight lessened. I need to get to a vantage point, he muttered to no one in particular as he shifted a glance around to find a high point somewhere. Besides the city walls, my lord, Beto said, I don't see anything around. Mandla walked up, nodding thoughtfully at him. Can't feel a thing, which means no mages around. That's good, Connell replied. Isn't it? If times was normal, I'd say yes. The times ain't normal. If you was attacking a city, wouldn't you use mages? Yes, I would. Where's Corba? Madeline rolled her eyes. She's looking for a secret entrance to the city. What? Why? Connell redirected his attention to the battle, which was no longer much of a battle as the dragons had wiped out over half of Halfdan's army, giving Connell's forces a lopsided victory. Madeline shrugged. His mind already dismissing Corla, Connell urged his horse forward, his bodyguard moving in sync with him, along with Madeline, Beto, and Torgrith. They were met halfway by Lorcan, comfortably seated on his horse, leading a defiant and chained Halfdan, shuffling behind him. You have won another battle, my lord, Lorcan announced. Giving her a brief glance, Connell smiled at him. Status? Don't have a final status yet, but the severest injury we have so far is a sprained ankle. He shook his head with admiration, then held up the chain. This is their commander, the dreaded Halfdan. Connell stared down at her. She was a tall, muscular woman who was not unattractive. She wore the battle dress of a commander, padded leather pants, tall boots, and a thick leather vest. Why are you here attacking innocent people? When she didn't answer, Lorcan yanked her chain, causing her to stumble. Our commander, Lord Connell, asked you a question. Commander, she sneered. This young pup knows about as much as battle as I do about cooking. Yet here you stand, Lorcan grinned. Brutally defeated, I might add. She said nothing, but her scowl remained. Why did Torian want you here? Connell asked. What was your mission? When she didn't answer, he leaned forward. Do you know who I am? Of course not, she retorted. I am Connell, he slowly intoned. King Cameron's son. You know who he was. Afghan suspiciously eyed him. Cameron is dead. So are his children. Wrong, dearie, Madeline answered for him. Cameron had 2 children, but you know that. That's why you're here. You were supposed to draw him out and kill him. She suddenly turned to Connell. That's why there are no mages here. Torian knew you'd have some with you, and mages here would have alerted you. That was your mission? Connell huffed in feigned disbelief. To draw me out, to kill me? You and your puny army were never any match for my armies. Bravely spoken, sitting there high on your horse, she shot back. You think you're a match for me, he taunted. You really think that you can defeat me? I'd carve you like a cold chunk of ham, she sniffed. Connell slid down from his horse. Unchain her and give her a sword. My lord, Lorcan startled. No! Do it, Connell barked. Lorcan hesitated, yet saw the fire in Connell's eyes. Flipping the chain to one of the bodyguards, he said, Unchain her, find her a sword. Afghan rubbed her wrists, shaking her head at Connell as she smiled at his stupidity. Now, at least, she had the opportunity to fulfill her mission. Another bodyguard found a sword, tossing it to her before stepping back to form a circle. Noting the circle of one-on-one match, others of Lorcan's forces joined in watching, surprised, though admiring Connell's bravery. Seeing the battle-proven enemy commander, many thought his decision foolish. Connell reached into his saddlebag and pulled out 2 sets of iron bars connected by a short length of metal chain. What are those? Beto murmured to Madeline. Don't know. Never seen them before. Lorcan frowned at the strange contraptions. Do you not want a sword, my lord? Nah, Connell nonchalantly answered. I think I'll use these. Hacken snorted a derisive laugh. You will fight me with those? You make it too easy for me. We shall see, Connell smiled, silently praying his nunchuck runes didn't fail him. Moving to the center of the circle, he began spinning his nunchucks by his sides. Gauging the spinning bars, Hapkan sniffed in scorn and took the first step to press the attack, only to find the bars spinning at Connell's side were now crisscrossing in front of him like a windmill. Brought up short in her attack, she feinted left, then attacked to his right. With his left hand, Connell flicked a nunchuck at her head, causing her to overreact and lean backwards out of the way. In that instant, Connell attacked as a blur of speed, leaping and spinning midair as another nunchuck whirled in a wide, powerful sweep and embedded with a crack on her ribcage, resulting in an audible grunt of pain. Hafgan reeled backwards, her breathing suddenly exploding in pain, and her strength compromised. She lifted her sword too late as the metal bar smashed her into her head and the world turned black as she crumpled to the ground. Connell stood over the prostrate body, staring at the indentation of the woman's skull. She was still alive, though unresponsive, blood seeping from her nose and ear. You really think you could defeat me? He loudly challenged before pulling up the sleeve and revealing a tattoo on his shoulder. I am the Cobra of Prophecy. I can't be defeated. The revelation was electric, and word spread amongst the armies faster than any messenger could ever deliver. The Cobra of Prophecy was their commander. What do we do with her, Lord? Connell Lorcan asked, staring at the woman crumpled on the ground. We finished the job, Connell coldly answered. She was sent here to find me and kill me. She was willing to destroy an entire city just to get to me. Dropping the nunchucks on the ground, he grabbed her head by the hair while reaching for a stiletto in his boot. In one quick motion, he sliced her across the throat, wiping his blade across the fabric of her pants to clean it. He glanced up to see Lorcan's look, a mixture of stoic understanding and disappointment. What would you have me do? I've nearly killed her with these. He picked up the nunchucks. I crushed her skull. There is no survival. Oh, sure, she might have lived for a couple of days, weeks even. I've seen people injured like this, stonemasons who fail to pay attention when a stone dislodged and hustled down to destroy their lives. The lucky ones die immediately. The unlucky ones lingered in the pain worse than dying. He dips his head to look at her. I did her a favor. I know, my lord. Lorcan acknowledged and nodded. It was necessary. What's truly sad is that under different circumstances, she could have been one of my commanders. Torian's poison must be cleansed away, Madeline wisely stated. She pointed at the dead woman, then narrowed her gaze at Lorcan. She had a choice, just like you. You chose to fight. She chose to stay. Not everyone's tainted by Torian. Those who chose to yield to him are just as evil as he is. Story strode up, looking pleased and disappointed at the same time. Well, I'll take a win any day. It wasn't much of an effort. He glanced down at Halfgan. What happened to her? That's Commander Halfgan, Lorcan said. She decided to fight Connell. Story blinked as his gaze switched between Connell and Halfgan. He noticed the nunchucks in Connell's hands. You use those? Yes. I've seen those used once before. Very dangerous weapons when used by someone who knows what they're doing. You're just full of surprises. Connell grinned and shrugged. What's your status? We're all fine, Story chuckled. Like I said, easiest battle I've ever been in. The dragons were a nice touch, especially since no one has seen a dragon for hundreds of years. Almost terrified us as much as the enemy. How'd you manage it? Connell thought about Drewston and Mynheer, deciding they would reveal their dual status when they were ready. Pure luck. I'll explain later. Let's go see how the city fared. The city gates were still closed when they approached. In fact, the city was much too quiet. One would expect jubilation, especially anyone witnessing the crushing victory of the army that just rescued the city. The peephole slide in the smallest door within the left gate scraped open, then closed, and a small door pulled open, and a plump man stepped outside with an ingratiating smile as he pulled the door closed behind him. Oh, thank you so much for rescuing this city, he said as though repeating lines he had memorized for the occasion. We were in such dire circumstances before your timely arrival. Yes, you came in the nick of time. Thank you. He started to turn away when Connell stopped him. Whoa there, mister. Who are you? The man turned back, offering an ingratiating smile. I am the burgomaster of the city. Are you all okay? Yes, everything is fine. Do you have enough to feed your city? Connell asked, wondering why the man seemed so anxious to get back inside. Yes, the burgomaster repeated, everything is fine. Connell frowned at him and said, we'll need supplies. The man's eyes widened. Supplies? Yes, Connell emphasized. Supplies. You know, flour, water, meats, things like that. The burgomaster's ingratiating smile vanished as he wrung his hands and started talking to himself. Supplies? They never said anything about supplies. That wasn't part of the plan. They said it would be easy. He'd show up and she would kill him. Then everything would be fine. Never said anything about supplies. This is madness, Story blurted and stepped forward towards the door, causing the burgomaster to yelp and rush in, vainly attempting to close the door behind him before Connell kicked it in with such force that it sent the man sprawling on the ground. Connell stepped inside, followed by the others. However, once inside, they abruptly stopped, for there in the open space between the city gates and the interior walls were several sets of gallows, about a dangling from each rope. One set of gallows contained what looked to be a family, father, mother, and 3 children, all under the age of 10. Looking to his left, more gallows filled with limp bodies lined the street as it curved its way into the city. What happened here? The burgomaster's eyes filled with tears. They killed 1/10 of the city, then herded the rest east towards Havengard. My own family among them. We could do nothing to stop them. They said if anyone said anything about what happened here, they would all die. Why? You were the son of Cameron? The burgomaster gazed at him, his shoulders settling in resignation. Yes. Exhaling a long-suffering sigh, he wiped a tear away. With bitterness in his voice, he clenched his jaw. And no longer matters, for my family is condemned. She was supposed to kill you. He promised that once you were dead, everyone could return. And you honestly believed that, Lorcan scoffed. Wake up, man. Your family was doomed before they set foot outside the blighted city. He pointed at Connell. This man is your only hope. He is more than a king's son. He reached up to touch the sleeve covering Connell's tattoo. With your permission, Lord? None needed. Connell replied, pulling up the sleeve to display the snake's head that shimmered with crimson sheen. He's the cobra who would defeat Torian. The reaction was what Lorcan had hoped, for the burgomaster dropped to his knees. By the gods, it's true. Save my family, my lord. I'll do my best, Connell reassured him. Bending down to grasp him by the elbow, he lifted him to standing. Now tell me what happened. 20 minutes later, he had heard enough. So there's no army close by? That's what I overheard, my lord. Fear was supposed to join Halfgang here and wait for you. Once you were eliminated, they'd proceed west. At least that's what I could make out. And the families they moved out to Gorwick left several days ago? Yes, my lord. Headed for Havengard. They should be closing in on the city by now. Connell frowned at Lorcan's story. Why would Tory want the distraction of civilians in Havengard? Civilians who don't even live there. Dragons and hostages, Drewston said, walking up, Mynheer beside him. By now, Torian is fully aware that dragons do exist, and that they are on your side. I imagine he's betting that you won't use them when you attack Havengard for fear of killing innocent women and children, which would negate the advantage of having dragons, Lorcan observed. Exactly. Where have you two been? Connell gazed knowingly at them. Scouting, Mynheer answered. By the way, there's an army to the south headed this way.
Halfway through. 10 more chapters to go. We're closing in on the epic battle of the end. All right. We will pick this up again next week. So make sure you have your notifications on so that you get the notice when the new videos drop. And we will see you next week.